It's an absolute pleasure to be able to talk about Rethinking Piano Performance, the Embodied Mind, because it is the title of a book I wrote, and then rewrote under COVID. Right, I'd like you to read that. Written in 469 to 399 BC by Socrates. So this approach to the body and the mind goes back a very long way, where the body is something rather distasteful. So the fact that I can link the first part of this title, Rethinking Piano Performance, with the second part, namely the embodied mind, is due to academic studies going through a period of rapid change in recent years. The musicological agenda being expanded to include a large range of issues, in particular the relationship between analysis and performance, with which I am concerned today, and by an equally fast-growing interdisciplinary field, performance science, and the neuro and human movement sciences. Therefore, my objective is to bring research from both fields together to support the notion that a performance is an embodied process. That is to say, it is a dialogue between the performer's brain and their body, and their body and their brain. While this dialogue is, according to neuroscientist Antonio Damasio, with whom I've worked, a continuous flow, I can only unfortunately deliver separate explanations concerning the meaning of embodiment by first explaining the relevant findings of Damasio's research, amongst others, and second, discussing the recent changes concerning analysis and performance, which allows performers like you to take a more informal approach to analysis, in particular addressing a topic which has largely resisted systemization and which is dear to my heart, and that is shape. In the last part of the talk, I will talk about the potential, in part, for embodying the performer in the music by coordinating the findings of the neuro and human movement scientists and the analyst, which in this case is me. So, the research of Damasio in 2012 says that the mind emerges from the small circuits within the brain, which form larger networks and create momentary patterns or maps that we then experience as images in the mind. But they are not, as Damasio points out, only images of a visual kind. They can refer to images of any sense origin in the body, the performer's body, such as the vestibular, the visual and the internal milieu, visceral, and most importantly for all of us, fine touch systems. That said, the process of the mind of the performer is a continuous flow of such images, some of which correspond to activities outside the brain, such as the physical interaction of the performer's body with the piano, or, in some of your cases, your other instruments, while others are based on the change that occurs within the performer's body and brain during the performance, while yet again, other images may be reconstructed from memory in the process of recalling the music. Also, Damasio says that if the performer's mind avails itself of multiple maps of the systems in the body, which I've already described, this creates a highly detailed perspective on their musical universe, which is external to the brain, and his or her responses to events that occur during your practice and your performance may be met with far greater precision. Crucially, however, the performer's perception, in whatever sensory form, is the result of the brain's ability to produce a musical template. And how this is so, I discuss next. So Damasio provides a bald reminder, and this is very important and something I didn't know either, that the brain is attached to the body and that its most distinctive feature is its ability to create maps, using body-to-brain signals, neural and chemical, that go both ways, as I've said, and permit the brain to create and maintain a multimedia documentary on the performer's body. These maps guide the performer's motor behavior during practice and performance. For example, the body-to-brain signals enables the performer's body to inform the brain, this is how I am built, and this is how you see me. And then the brain informs the body about what to do to maintain an even keel during performance. A most desirable consequence, considering that the success of any performance depends on taking the right action. As Damasio says, actions or bodily movement and maps and movement and mind are part of an unending cycle, an idea which he says is suggestively captured by the founding father of modern brain science, Rodolfo Linhares, when he attributed the birth of the mind to the brain's control of organized movement. Significantly for the performer, these images, or in this instance, I now refer to it as a musical template, which arise in the brain, can represent the performer's analysis of the process or pacing of the music's motion, to which, as I show in the second part of the talk, the performer may move their bodies analogously, thus projecting the shape of the music with far greater precision. Thus, with the tangible evidence provided, which shows that the mind and the body were in reality never divorced from each other, in the second part, I will show how musical analysis may inform the musical template upon which the performer may act during performance. So now we're going to look at the role of analysis. It's remarkable that in the last few years, academic musical circles have begun to acknowledge that musical analysis and performance have anything to say to each other at a time when I am trying to show you that the performer's mind is fully and unequivocally embodied. However, I shall show until recently, analysis and performance were quite separate matters. So bear with me, I'd rather like to give you the background of what was going on. For example, the treatises of C.P.E. Bach, 1714 to 1788, Leopold Mozart, 1719 to 1787, and Giuseppe Mazzini, 1805 to 1872, clearly provides evidence of the general preoccupation in piano performance with the practical matter of fingering and expressive content of a musical work. In 1753, C.P.E. Bach writes the essay on the true art of playing keyboard instruments, which I'm sure you've read, in which he suggests that the performer should be concerned not only with the skillful use of the fingers, but also with the true content and effect of the piece. Similarly, Mozart writes or advises that the performance should attend to the practical aspects of performance, no mention of analytical processes. He says, figure out the fingering, attend closely to every annotation and direction, and to play the work as it is set down and not otherwise. Or he, the performer, has also to enter the passion that is to be expressed and to apply and execute all the runs, the legatos and the staccatos, the fortes and the pianos, in a word, everything that bears on tasteful delivery of the piece. What do you think that has limited you to, apart from your emotional reaction to it and trying to express it? There are no means of doing it except sort out your fingering. So, somewhat later, Mazzini advises young artists to become familiar with the music of the great, not to analyze and dissect them with cold, ancient doctrines of the music professors, but to gather into himself the creative and unifying spirit that moves these works. Even in 1948, Ralph Kirkpatrick, who was a harpsichordist, writes that the traditional piano teacher's advice to their students is, learn the notes and put in the expression, and I would venture that little has changed today. As Sampson points out in 1991, this separation of performance and analysis may have come about as a result of categories of music such as analysis being formed, enlarged by our need to make knowledgeable, manageable, or persuasive in different contexts. I find that rather obscure. And Kerman describes this separation in the following way. Performers are doers, analysts are talkers. But what is analysis? In 1895, Guido Adler writes a pioneering essay which lays down the chief principles of a new discipline entitled Musikwissenschaft. According to Sampson, Musikwissenschaft, like other emergent academic disciplines in the late 19th century, adopts methods of classification which are indebted to the natural sciences and the prevailing positive climate of the time, that is, scientific approach to facts and datas. At this juncture, music theory is included, while any serious reference to analysis is not. This omission possibly reveals much about the humble status of musical analysis. At the time, however, analysis as a discipline in its own right emerges at the turn of the 20th century. And reasons for this are that there are an orientation of music theory and theorists such as Schoenberg and Schenker, amongst others, produced this idea of a structural sense of form, which gained unstoppable momentum, sweeping music theory before it and building on it oppressive of an entire edifice of a newly independent discipline, musical analysis. It is in the here and now, well, I am actually referring to 1968, when Cohn writes Musical Form and Musical Performance, which questions the difference between, or the relationship between aesthetic perception and musical form. He observes that nearly all practical instruction in performance is directed towards the encouragement of immediate apprehension. This sounds rather similar to the things I mentioned before: beauty of tone, careful phrasing, balance, rhythmic articulation being examples. To counter this, he proposes that the discussion should be widened to include, and crucially for this talk, the nature of musical form, shape. Second, the aims of the performer and how to achieve them, and third, the relationship of musical style to performance. But it is the first one that he mentions, the nature of musical form, shape, which has influenced this paper. However, in 1999, writing in Rethinking Music, Cook writes that the emergence of performance and analysis as a rediscovered sub-discipline within music theory is considered to be more due than anything else to the publication of do you know Wallace Berry's book, Musical Structure and Performance, and written in 1989, where he attempts to relate analysis and performance, albeit in a prescriptive way, which is somewhat frowned on, since he poses the question of how, I quote, a structural relationship exposed in analysis can be illuminated in the inflections of edifying performance. In other words, his stance is that analysis should inform performance, since he believes that performers have a great deal to learn from analysis, but he doesn't address the possibility of a reciprocal process of learning. Because of this omission, criticism has been levelled at Berry, for as Goodman says, it's too rigid an application of analysis to performance. Indeed, John Rink, 1990, suggests that perhaps Berry could be a little less rigorous and that a little more subjective, generalized reflection, possibly on the basis of informed intuition, might have inspired those penetrating insights into the music, not just the structure, that are essential to truly enlightened performance. Well, nevertheless, I think this was a good beginning. And by 1995, there's a tremendous outpouring of scholarly writing about musical performance, much of which is concerned with finding an overlap between analysis and performance, which is possibly stemming from a reaction by contemporary music analysts to the rigors of formal or structural practice that dominated much of the 20th century. Does anyone like to venture what I mean by informed intuition? It's drawing on your knowledge that you've acquired so far. It's not some sort of remote thing that suddenly flies in front of you in a vision. It is through acquired knowledge, which you may not be so aware of. As a result, two opposing schools of thought emerge, which characterize the literature. First, there is the authoritarian school of thought, which advocates serious analysis of the score as the basis of interpretation. Secondly, a pessimistic view expressing doubt that analysis and performance have much of any substance to say to each other. The work of Narmore is an example of the authoritative approach, while Dunsby, who I recommend everybody reads, is an example of the latter approach. Howell occupies the middle ground. The implications of Narmore's approach are twofold, but there is a suggestion that the study of analysis should enable performers to understand how musical works are structured, although others, such as Cook, say that while analysis of this kind may produce a structure and inform performance, it can only be a literal translation of the product of analysis. Secondly, Narmore suggests that analysis can help performers to discover how different interpretations can alter the listener's perception and understanding of living works of art, and that the performer should be responsible for him or herself as the performer, as well as the composer and the listener. Well, that's a great responsibility. Well, Dunsby, unlike Berry and Narmore, is less prescriptive because he makes allowances for creative freedom on the part of the performer. Nevertheless, according to Cook again, who considers performativity to be the foundation of pluralism, if you know what that means. I think it's slightly obscure. Dunsby remains an analyst along the lines of Schenker's well-known distinction between musical effect and the manner of its realization in performance. Howell, 1992, warns against the danger of exclusivity and specialization within the discipline and against the current influence of the current zeitgeist, or spirit of the age, fearing that its quasi-scientific manner may be alienating to both analyst and performer alike. Instead, he proposes a middle ground which lies between what music analysts explore and what performers produce, so that a creative energy can emerge from the conflict between reason and instinct. He concludes that this is the essence of good performance, and one which, again, as Cook points out, allows the role of analysis to raise up possibilities rather than providing solutions. Rink, who was my mentor at Royal Holloway, approach is more sympathetic, because he really was a performer as well as an analyst. More sympathetic to the needs of the performer, he suggests that analysis and performance may be interlinked intimately, and in ways directly impinging on the act of interpretation. Not just in some wishfully, I quote, conceived, theoretical, motivated fashion. Both Howell and Rink's approaches contrast considerably with those prevailing in the past, when performers who were often unable to express their views in a tangible or articulate way took the musical score as a starting point for their performance preparation and employed stratagems peculiar to their individual musical concept. So, in the second part of this talk, I will show that it is not only a performative approach to analysis, which I am pleased to say Cook, who I quote a lot because he wrote a book called Rethinking Music, stresses the inseparability of intellectual or musical reasoning in the mind and bodily knowledge becoming more acceptable. But also there's a willingness by some analysts in academic musical circles to address a key issue which has largely been neglected, and that is shape. Now, to me, this is the great leap forward. So we'll take a slight breath here and move on to the next slide. Thank you, Laura.